All right, section 4, language. The basic concepts of language. Language is the communication of ideas through symbols that are arranged according to rules of grammar. Language makes it possible for people to share knowledge. People can use language to describe what they ate for breakfast or what they thought of the movie they just saw. They can use language to set down the learning of the past generations and store it for people who will live hundreds of years in the future. Language also permits people to use the eyes and ears of people to learn more than they could ever from their own individual experiences. Human language is an incredibly complex mental process. Our words and sentences are composed of many parts. The way the brain processes speech sounds, the way words relate to each other, the combination of words for sentences, and the meaning of words and sentences are all part of the psychology of language called psycholinguistics. And some basic questions psycholinguistics ask, which are some pretty cool questions that I even ask myself from time to time. Why do we have language? And where does language come from in the first place? Like, how did it all start? All right, hereditary influences. In the mid 1950s, an American linguistic, Noam Chomsky, proposed a theory to answer basic questions of human language acquisition. Chomsky said that we are all born with the ability to learn language. He said that we are also born with the knowledge of basic grammatical structure. That is, that the human ability to use sanics is hardwired into the brain. And according to Chomsky, this inborn ability to put together a language in sentences helps explain the amazing rapidity with which children learn languages. One line of argument that supports Chomsky's theory is the fact that children make certain characteristic errors as they learn their first language, while they do not make other types of errors, and this natural tendency to acquire a language can be called a language acquisition device. And the LAD, or an LAD, the LAD enables the brain to understand the use of grammar. It enables people to turn ideas into sentences, and people may not be ready for chemistry or algebra until high school, but the language acquisition device in your brain makes people most capable of acquiring a language between 18 to 24 months. And that extends to the age when you hit puberty. You can learn other languages in that time, and the language that you're learning, you can expand on that too. But you start to form and to start to learn the basics of language between 18 and 24 months old. 1 to 2 year olds seem to learn languages with ease. In many cases, they learn more than one language and become bilingual. In America, that tends not to be the case. Environmental influences. Many people have the inborn ability to learn a language, but environmental influences are also important. Learning theorists claim that language learning is similar to other kinds of learned behavior. Children learn language, at least in part, by observing and imitating other people. For example, all babies vocalize nonsense syllables, a process called babbling. But during the first year, babies start to babble the sounds they hear around them from speakers of the local language and drop other sounds not spoken in that language. Billions of children have acquired the languages of their parents and have processed to hand them down to their children. So if you learn a certain phrase or a certain way to say something from your parents, you're most likely going to pass that down to your kids once you have your kids. In this manner, languages pass with small changes from generation to generations. Discussions about basic language acquisition are far from over. Chomsky has many critics, behavioralists, psychologists being the most vocal among the critics, but we leave the arguments for now to look more closely at language itself. All right, the basic elements of language. Language contains three basic elements: phonemes, morphemes, and sanics. Phonemes are sound, morphemes are the basic units of meaning, and sanics, that's going to be grammar. Combinations of these units create the words, phrases, and sentences that we use to communicate ideas. The meaning of words and sentences can vary according to semantics. Phonemes, the basic sounds of language, are called phonemes. Humans can produce about 100 different sounds. Some languages only have about a dozen phonemes. However, there are 26 letters in the English alphabet, but there are more than 26 phonemes. The English language uses about 43. All right, morphemes. The units of meaning in a language are called morphemes. Morphemes are made up of phonemes. Some morphemes, such as car and bike, are words in and of themselves. Other morphemes are prefixes. For example, pre, which means before. And while others are still suffixes. For example, ness, which can convert to a noun. Many words use combinations of morphemes. English uses morphemes such as Z and S to make objects plural, so more than one. So, for example, car is a word, but if you add an S to it, it makes it plural, cars. All right, sanics. The way in which we arrange to make phrases and sentences are called sannexes. The rules for word order are the grammar of a language. English sannix usually follows the pattern of subject, verb, and object of the verb. So subject, verb, object. Alberto cooked dinner. I mean, if we used object, verb, subject, it would sound like dinner cooked Alberto, which wouldn't make any sense. All right, semantics, the study of meaning, is called semantics. Semantics involves the relationship between language and the things that depict it in the language. Words that sound alike, such as right and right, can have different meanings. This is why the English language is so complex. And other words can also be spelled alike as well. But they can mean different things. And there's also words that are spelled the same that mean different things as well. Like I said, this is why the English language is so confusing. Probably why I had so much trouble with it when I was a kid. All right, the stages of language development. How do people learn languages? Children develop language in a sequence of steps. The sequence is the same for nearly all children, no matter where they live or what language they learn. It begins with crying, cooing, and babbling, then moves into learning of words, and finally learning of grammar. All right, crying, cooing, and babbling. Crying, cooing, and babbling are considered true language, or not considered true language, because they do not use symbols with specific meanings. Nevertheless, crying is an effective form of verbal expression. It usually gets the attention of caregivers, like myself. My daughter was crying in her room last night, so I had to wake up at 2 in the morning and go see what the problem was. All right, during their second month, babies begin to coo. Coos are vowel-like and resemble O's and Ahs. Cooing seems to express feelings of pleasure. Tired, hungry babies do not coo. Cries and coos can communicate discomfort, hunger, or enjoyment. At about 6 months of age, infants began to babble. Unlike crying and cooing, babbling has the sounds of speech. Researchers have found that babies understand much of what they are saying before they can talk. They demonstrate understanding with their actions and gestures. Words, words, words. All right, after babbling comes the learning of words, the start of true language. Most children acquire new words slowly at first. After they speak the first word, there may be a gap. In fact, it might take another 3 or 4 months before they have a 10-word vocabulary. At about 18 months, children are saying about 24 words. Most early words are nouns, names for things. Research indicates that reading to children increases their vocabulary. It is thus a good idea for parents to pull out the storybook and read to their children. Studies suggest that reading to children improves their awareness of phonemes and improves the child's decoding skills. It also leads to higher reading achievement and advanced oral language development, especially in the elementary grades. Children sometimes overreach. They try to talk about more things than they have words for. My daughter does this all the time. Often they extend the meaning of words to refer to things for which they do not have words. This behavior is called overextension. For example, if a child sees a cow but does not know the word for cow, she or he might call the cow a doggy. Woof, woof. All right, development of grammar. First things children say are usually brief, but they have meanings of sentences. That is, these utterances have a grammar. Even one word can express a complete thought, such as sit. Children just starting to learn a language can only use words essential to communicating. Sometimes a word will have more than one meaning, depending on the circumstances. For example, doggy can mean there is a dog. That stuffed animal looks like a dog, or I want you to give me the dog. Most children readily teach their parents the meaning of their utterances, and they are delighted when parents do as requested, and may howl or cry or get upset when they do not get what they're trying to say. As they approach their second birthday, most children begin to use two-word sentences. That doggy might seem like just a phrase, but it is really a sentence in which is and a are implied. That is a doggy instead of that doggy. Between the ages of 2 and 3, children's sentences expand to include missing words. One interesting aspect of how children learn grammar has to do with irregular words. English has many irregular verbs and nouns. Children first learn irregular words by imitating their parents. 2-year-olds often use them correctly, but then something odd tends to happen. Even though the children have used the words correctly in the past, they soon begin to use them incorrectly. What has happened is that they have learned the rules of forming the past tense and plurals. Once they have learned these rules, they begin to make errors. For example, 3 to 5-year-olds may say, I runned away instead of I ran away. They are likely to talk about sheep geese or gooses. They have seed on the farm instead of seen. Children make these errors because they have applied the normal rules to all words, even the words for which the rules do not work, a process called overregulation. Although it may seem like a bad thing when children begin to incorrectly use words that they previously used correctly, this represents overregulation, represents the advance in the development of grammar. In another year or two, children will learn the correct forms of irregular words as well as the regular ones, and overregulation will stop. All right, bilingualism. To speak to language fluently is to be bilingual. In general, learning a second language during childhood is much easier than learning it later in life. The fact supports the theory that there is a period in childhood during which language acquisition is the easiest and most effective. Although the majority of people in the United States only speak English, the number of those who are bilingual is growing. Many people in other countries speak two or more languages. Some countries have a majority populations whose languages differ from the official tongue. A large percentage of Europeans learn English and the languages of neighboring nations. Consider the Netherlands. Dutch is the native language, but children are also taught French, German, and English in the public schools. Today, most psychologists believe that it is good for children's cognitive development to be bilingual in Spanish, Russian, Chinese, or any other language. Bilingualism expands children's awareness of different cultures and broadens their outlooks on life. Various groups have tried to require that English be used for all public occasions in this country, but no language is designated as the official language in the United States. It's a fun fact. All right, that's your lesson for today. Peace.